Trump. Now, the White House has confirmed the phone conversation between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin has taken place, and it lasted a couple of hours. The war in Ukraine and the possibility of a ceasefire were the main topics of discussion by the two men. Mr. Trump has made it clear he wants the bloodbath to end. It's the second time Mr. Trump and Mr. Putin have spoken since February. But of course, there were direct talks between the Russian and Ukrainian delegations in Istanbul last week, but Mr. Trump had said nothing would happen until he talks to Mr. Putin. We'll have more on that in a moment, but a Liberal politician who favours closer ties with the EU has won Romania's presidential election. There were celebrations into the early hours after Nicolae Dan, a softly spoken mathematician, declared victory, overtaking George Simeon, the far-right candidate for president. Correspondents say this result means Romania will stay on its pro-EU path and will still support its neighbour Ukraine to defend itself. They say that after a close race and months of tension, in the end, the Eurosceptic isolationist vision for Romania has failed.
I think it's clear that I have won that trial. But the question is the tension in the society between the two parts that I think that will remain for maybe months or years from now on. I think Romania have to continue the external politics, including Ukraine. So including helping Ukraine and contributing in a balanced way in a European effort to sustain Ukraine. There have been no proper support for Mr. Simeon from someone from the Trump administration. He said himself that he have this kind of ideology, but there have been no support. I think that the Romanian authorities' decision to cancel the election was the correct one, but it was not well explained. Either for the Romanian, either for our partner administration. So it will be one of the main goals in order to clarify what happened in November.
Aș vrea să-l felicit pe contracandidatul meu, Nicu Șordan.
I would like to congratulate my opponent, Nicolae Dan. He has won the election, and this was the will of the Romanian people. I want to thank the over 5 million Romanians who placed their trust in me. I will not let you down. There is nothing more valuable to me than your trust. We stood alone against an entire system, alone against everyone, and I am proud of you. I hope I have represented you with honor. The fight for justice, for truth, for the natural family, for Christian faith, and for freedom must continue. We will remain an important and meaningful part of Romanian society. I urge every one of you, do not give up. We are going all the way, even if it is hard to feel this bitter taste of defeat. Romania and the Romanian people must come first. Thank you.
Libertate. Vom fi în continuare.
And that's George Simeon, the man who lost the election, congratulating the person we heard previously there, Nicolae Dan, who won. And for more on these stories, including, of course, that phone call between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin, let's speak now to the international affairs analyst, Dr. Marek Laskiewicz, who joins me on the line from London. Dr. Laskiewicz, thank you very much indeed for talking with us. Let's start with that conversation between Mr. Trump and Mr. Putin, lasting about 2 hours, we're told. What's the readout on that conversation? I understand the focus was on the war in Ukraine and the possibility of a ceasefire.
Yes, but as far as one can tell, nothing really new or definite has emerged. Not that it was to be expected. Yes, there is a possibility of a ceasefire, according to President Putin, if the agreements are right. Well, that's just a coded way of saying that when he gets what he wants, there will be a permanent truce, because a ceasefire in the Ukrainian sense of the word, a lull in the fighting whilst the negotiations continue, that was not offered. So therefore, it's hard to see exactly what Donald Trump has managed to achieve. However, we have very little information at present, and when it's stated fully, perhaps we can see more. President Donald Trump himself was pleased with the discussion quite clearly. I think what is clear is the fact that he's at all speaking to President Putin and trying to move things forward was for him already a step. But as far as I can tell, nothing of use, nothing new, and nothing definite has emerged.
Indeed, Mr. Trump, of course, has repeatedly stressed the importance of his personal relationship with Vladimir Putin. So the White House was pinning a lot of hope that that can move Mr. Putin towards the negotiating table. And in fairness, I think Mr. Putin spoke to the Russian media after that phone call, and he suggested that both the Russians and the Ukrainians would have to make some kind of compromise, which suggests a kind of, a little bit of an inch forward.
Yes, that is quite true. I think, to give Donald Trump his due, the fact that the talks took place in the last week was largely owing to him, and this conversation is largely owing to him. And President Putin clearly is prepared to do some sort of compromise, but the question is quite what compromise? And until we have the details, it's hard to be certain. One thing is clear, that President Donald Trump is not going to walk away from it at present, that something is going to slowly inch forward, to use your term, and that is very important. However, it should not be drawn from this point that I've just made. There will be any lull in the fighting. In fact, the fighting may well intensify until there is this sort of agreement. And therefore, from that point of view, as I said before, we're not actually going forward fast, particularly.
I think most analysts would agree with you that Ukraine and Russia, of course, at this moment are still miles apart in terms of what they're willing to accept for any potential ceasefire. But I understand that Donald Trump spoke to President Zelensky before he had that chat with Mr. Putin, and will speak to him now subsequent to that conversation. I mean, what do you understand to be Ukrainian expectations from this phone call between Putin and Trump?
As far as one can tell, what the Ukrainians and Russians want, that they've stated now for some time, hasn't changed. But that is publicly. Privately, President Putin has indicated there may be some compromise. President Zelensky has never actually shown much room for compromise, but he has been driven, or may well be driven to it, by President Trump. But they're very, very far apart. It's very hard to see quite how they can do a peace treaty at present.
Move away from that and talk about the Romanian election result, which has reached at least a discernible conclusion. Bucharest's Liberal mayor, Nicolae Dan, has won that presidential election, beating the right-wing nationalist George Simeon. Was that a surprise?
I thought it was 50-50 myself, which way it would go. I think, though, Simeon was surprisingly passive in his speech. The fact is that he won before, and that it was all taken away from him. And now this time he has lost, and yet he gave a very restrained speech to the point of just accepting his fate. And there's undoubtedly a great many Remains who are unhappy with what the victor stands for, as opposed to Simeon. And as indeed it was stated when in his victory speech, there will be continuing tension between the two sides. That is true, but there's no doubt that Romania will remain on board with the EU for the foreseeable future, which is very important, bearing in mind its neighbours Hungary and Slovakia. And therefore, from that point of view, it was a very significant victory for the EU, for Ukraine, and therefore, from this point of view, is a very important result indeed.
But of course, as you mentioned, Dr. Laskiewicz, Mr. Simeon still has a lot of support, doesn't he? And this has been a polarizing election. I mean, how difficult will it be to bring this fragmented country back together again?
I think, as indeed was stated by the now victorious president, it may take years. The fact of the matter is the Romanians are polarized because the EU, with its liberal West European values, is a different world to Eastern Europe, as Hungary and Slovakia show, and Romania is, or many Romanians are, on that side. And therefore, there's not going to be so much a question of bringing them on board as Romania staying within the EU fold for at least a few years, which is very important, bearing in mind the Ukrainian war. But to say it's going to come together as a nation quickly, I don't think that's going to happen. Rather, what's going to happen, there are going to be these two opposing camps, but at least for the time being, the liberal side has won. But it will not be necessarily easy for them to push forward on every liberal policy the EU wants, bearing in mind the sheer scale of the number of people who do not agree with the West European values.
Dr. Laskiewicz, I want to thank you very much indeed. Dr. Marek Laskiewicz is the International Affairs Analyst who was talking to me on the line there from London.